First of all, I want to say I was delighted when Daniel Eischen asked me to moderate this British Chamber webinar on behalf of Delano, because I think this is a subject that really has a wide-ranging impact. Now, before I introduce our speakers, I would like to give the audience a few highlights from the business travel survey that the Chamber conducted with its membership last week. And I would like to extend thanks from the Chamber to everybody who took part in that. We had a really good response. Now, unfortunately, for those involved directly in the travel business, the results of the survey are what we might generously call mixed. First of all, although 94% of respondents agreed that there was still a need for business travel, the same number do not think it will ever return to pre-COVID levels. And a whopping 97% think that business will not allow employees to start traveling again before 2021. So that means 2020 is pretty much wiped out for the business travel industry, or certain parts of it, as we might find out later. So we can talk about other takeaways from the survey later in the discussion, but now I would like to introduce our panelists. I'll do so in alphabetical order, just to be fair. So first of all, we have Robert Fish, who is President of Aviation Services at Lux Aviation. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for having me.
Then we have Serge Hansens, who's advisory partner at PwC and is currently specialized in digital smart identity and biometrics. Welcome, Serge. Hello. Then we have Peter Poorle, who is the CEO and co-founder of Sponsor My Event and director at media65.lu.
Hi, Duncan. Happy to be here with you.
Good, thank you. Welcome, Peter. And finally, we have Mario Vieira, who is the country manager at FCM Travel Solutions Luxembourg. Is Mario there?
Hi, Duncan. I had a problem.
Hi, Mario. It's okay.
And hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for sparing us your time. I'd like to start with a bit of an open question to you all. I will ask you one in turn. So first of all, are you surprised by the results of the Chamber's survey? When do you think business travel will once again be acceptable? Robert, maybe you can kick us off.
Well, a very good morning to all of you. And thank you again for the invite. I hope that everybody has passed a good summer, because looking at the weather outside, I think the summer is over. So when I looked at the title of the webinar, I was intrigued, because the first thing that came to mind was the song of The Clash, "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" But then the second phrase is important. If I stay, there will be trouble. If I go, it will be maybe double. So that is what we're going to talk today, I guess. So we're talking now about business travel, I think, mostly today. So it is a necessity. So that's why if I stay, I will have double or trouble. So I think that there it will be quite interesting to have a conversation with our colleagues here across the panel.
So, Robert, from your own experience, when do you think businesses will allow people to travel again on commercial airlines, let's say?
Well, let me take out my crystal ball and then let's see what it says. I think it is already there. The offer is already there on the commercial airlines. I'm not talking now about Lux Aviation. We are doing business aviation and helicopters. So we are outside the commercial environment with, let's say, the Airbus or the Dash 8s or the Boeing that we know from our home carrier. The offer is already there. So it is possible to travel. I used it already now in the last couple of weeks. I had to go to the US for business. There are some drawbacks, of course, but the offer is already there. So it is already possible to travel. We should go away from the idea, oh, everything is closed. If I go now to the terminal is shut up and they throw away the key with the last person who locked up the door. No, the offer is there. It is possible to travel. If you have to travel, you can. The only thing, there are some stringent measures that goes with it. and they are applicable to the airlines, where the airlines have invested a lot of money and new procedures to make travel a safer and more a sanitary place than it used to be. So that is something that we need also to recognize from the industry, that that the airlines invested a lot to make that the possibility to be infected is as little as possible. But on the other side, we also need to, as users, we need also to accept some of the stringent measures to us. So when can we travel? Well, it is open for travel. Are we able to accept those new measures or not? That's a different question.
Thank you, Robert. Serge, maybe I can call you in as you work for one of the big four, as we call them. The survey also revealed that a lot of people are worried about their main concerns are health and safety and the well-being of the workforce. What do you think about business travel right now? Is PwC allowing business travel already, or what is the situation?
It's a very broad question. The situation is the following. So we can travel for business, but we see also that from client perspective, sometimes it's not recommended. So it's both ways that we need to assess the situation on a case-by-case basis. I think more broadly, if we look at the perspective of the industry and the forecast from Iata, we see that it's a moving target. I think at the beginning of the crisis, the date of 21, 22 was really the target to pick up again with business travel as it was before the crisis. Now I see that they are talking about 2025. I think also you need to see the geography, and there will be higher speed business travel picking up in some geography and less in others. There will be a lot of variation, I would say there. What we can, so a lot of uncertainty on when it will be picking up, how fast it will be picking up, and what will be the consequences of that in terms of operations.
Thank you, Serge. Now, Peter, I think for your business, sometimes travel is essential. I mean, you cover events, you have to go and shoot videos. What's your take on this?
Well, the situation is very complicated, that's for sure. I mean, especially now with my two companies, on one hand, Media65, where we're specialized in conference films, conference videos, where we have been traveling before all across Europe just to film different conferences, which of course doesn't exist anymore for the moment. So the market has completely shifted for the moment. On the other hand, with Sponsor My Event, we're mainly active in America, handling their sponsorship opportunities, running the marketplace, which is only partly travel intense. So many of these things can be done actually online and virtually. So that kind of, I see a little bit both sides. On one hand, the necessity to travel. So if you want to make a film a conference somewhere, you have to just go into a plane, you have to fly over there and you have to film. While at the same time, you can also perfectly run a company like Sponsor My Event, where you have 70–80% of your clients sitting actually in America. You can do 90% of the business. You can do it without any problems also in this sector, also virtually. And the best example is simply that we're negotiating, for example, for the moment, a partnership to bring Sponsor My Event to the Brazilian market with a company in Brazil. I have never met these people in person, so we do all the negotiations over Skype, over other means. It works perfectly well. We had for some time, we had in New York a business developer working for us. It took actually 6 months before I met her for the first time in person, and still it was a very good cooperation. So it shows that there are substitutes actually for physical travel, but it really, really depends on the sector. What I see for the moment is clearly that there are a lot of solutions which are developing. And as we are very deeply, of course, in the event industry, we follow quite closely also these developments with new technologies, new software which is appearing. And we, as Sponsor My Event, we're also part of this development, because we're just launching now a new product which is called Boosted. So it's not BOOSTED, but it's BOOTHTED, and it's providing actually virtual booths for companies who would like to sponsor or exhibit at virtual trade shows, so that they have their own booths. And the best example is also the sponsor of today's webinar post. They are using actually this booth. And one of the goals of this booth is, of course, to help companies not necessarily to be physically present during an event, but also to handle this remotely. So it's a very tricky question also. And to answer also your first question, my opinion, when will it resume also with the travels? I believe that it will step by step, it will resume sometimes in 2021, really depending on the situation. Are we going to have some vaccine or not? But my best guess is also it will never come to the level anymore as we have seen it before. So business travel will be much more reduced, and it will be different, and it will be very often also replaced by some other technical possibilities or technologies which enable us to be present without having to travel.
Thank you, Peter. I think we can go more into the digital solutions that are available later in the discussion. I'd like to bring in Mario now, because Mario, I think FCM and some other business travel solution companies also conducted a survey in collaboration with Luxair. Do your results reflect the British Chamber survey? I think they're pretty much in line with it.
Yes, absolutely. So we have been conducting several surveys here on the market, and also from FCM worldwide, and they reflect more or less similar results. So the biggest majority, and around 90% of the travelers, want to come back and resume travel, simply because they need to build trust with their counterparts. And there are many sectors who cannot afford not to travel. So consider the constructions, so technical people, and other logistical people. So they must travel. From a purely administrative sector, that can be replaced on a short notice by video conferencing. But the future says traveling is a necessity. Now, what needs to be brought in as a consideration is we have time now. The majority of the corporates and their travel managers are doing what they do best, is planning. So they need to reassure their traveler community that when traveling, it is according to certain hygiene, safety, health considerations. So duty of care and risk management is predominant for the future. And that's where we as a travel agency can support the corporations for the future. We have access to the most accurate and latest updates of airline news, hotel news. What are these hotels doing in terms of health and safety? What are the immigration recommendations or restrictions? What type of documentation or certificates do you need to bring with you, etc., etc. So that's now the moment to have certain reflections about your travel policy. So FCM has been working out a back to business framework where these points are all addressed. So choose your suppliers according to your different criteria. And also data management is key. So you want to know as a corporation where your travelers are around the globe when it comes up to resume travel. So definitely there will be a step-by-step moving into travel resume. Prediction says the first and second quarter will still be slightly slow, but then it should come after Q2, over 50% should pick up again. That's why now all considerations on health and safety and duty of care for the future, and all this needs to be planned now upfront.
And what specific impact did the pandemic have on your business?
We as a service provider, we are totally dependent on the volume we treat on behalf of our clients. So we are suffering around 95%. So imagine that we are surviving, we are struggling for surviving nowadays. But this makes us strong because we had to take difficult decisions all around the globe. But salespeople, commercial people, development and technology have been reinforced. And so I predict that this is happening also within other corporations and in other sectors. So technology will be key driver for the future. So we are addressing this very carefully. We are preparing all what was already in the pipeline, but this gave us the opportunity to accelerate everything. So the traveler of tomorrow, he needs to be informed before traveling. His corporations needs to track him during his trip, and when coming back to office, the corporates needs to make sure that when travelers are coming back from a risk area, that he's not going to infect the office. So all these considerations are clearly selected, and we can help the different institutions to work on this travel policy and all these duty of care considerations.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Robert, if we can turn to you, as a private plane operator, have you seen an upturn in business as a result of the restrictions in business travel on commercial airlines?
So, Duncan, we are business jet operators. Private jets, we are doing both, but business jet is a tool that gives you flexibility, that saves time, and is therefore commercial for business development purposes. The private jet, as we have a certain picture in mind, that is a part of our clientele. But if you look at the vast amount or vast majority of our flights, this represents maybe 5% of our flights. The rest, it is a business tool. So we have never stopped operating. So we have continued to operate. What has been, of course, a restriction, and a very strong restriction to our operation, was the different travel restrictions imposed by, in Europe, for example, by the member states, in Australia or in South Africa, where you had entire continents who just locked down. So it means the intercontinental travel basically stopped from one day to the other, except if it was government related or had some exceptions. But there we had, of course, a decrease in flights, a severe decrease in flights. What was now internal to a continent, if there was the possibility to travel, then the travel continued. Not as much as before. We are picking now up to the same levels as we were before the crisis, but it took a little bit of time before we got there. Now, what makes it different than to the commercial travel? Well, if I can resume it in one sentence, is in a business jet, you know who is going to sit next to you. It's usually entire teams who are already working in the same office, families or people who are very close to each other. So they have their own travel habits. They need that flexibility. There are some meetings that they need to attend where severe decisions need to be taken, and that can only be done in situ. If you are not able to travel where your plant is and so on, and you need to take some difficult decisions, well, then it's going to be, this might have an impact. So we have continued to fly. No pictures of our jets and helicopters sitting along the runway with tape all over the engines and so on. No, our airplanes were ready to fly, and they delivered. So this is a little bit where business aviation shows the flexibility it has. We as a group, as Lux Aviation, instead of only going through the recommendation of our governing agency here in Europe, EASA, to disinfect the airplanes, we thought that we should get an approval, a certification to disinfect, so that we would further give an assurance to our customers that the way they were traveling was as safe as it gets for them.
Did you notice any significant change in the type of passenger you were flying during the pandemic?
Well, what we have now found out is that we got some new customers, and those were the customers who have a profile that were flying mostly business class within Europe, if I would take just the European continent. So we are getting some new customers who are discovering or rediscovering business aviation and also the flexibility of it. There is that gives a solution that is a response to their travel needs. We cannot cover, of course, all travel needs, simply because now, if we are taking now our continent and you want to go outside Europe, it's quite a difficult enterprise because there are just too many options. Already, if we consider the 28 states, as of today, midnight, I just found out Hungary closed its borders. So, so we have gotten a new clientele who has the requirement to go some places where at the moment airline traffic has not resumed, or where they just say, I do not want to risk it. I do not want to go to a terminal. And for sure, I do not want to go to a Paris, Frankfurt hub or Munich hub where there will be thousands and thousands of people. So that this is a new clientele that we are serving now.
Okay, thank you. Peter, if we can turn to you. During lockdown, we all became very familiar with digital solutions for business meetings. I mean, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. But as you've mentioned, for larger events and trade fairs and conferences, that sort of personal physical contact, the lack of it had a much bigger impact. You've mentioned some of the tools that can be used for this. How do you see the future of these sorts of events evolving, and are software companies now developing new tools that can overcome these difficulties?
Well, we have to kind of distinguish, indeed, as you said already, the physical contact and on the other hand, simply the pure information flow. Just making sure that during business events, the information flow and the information that people are requesting, all these things can be quite easily done through virtual systems. So we have conference systems, we have Zoom, we can speak with people, we can chat with people, we can send over links, documents, etc. All this is pretty much technology-wise, it's standard. Kind of the holy grail really of all these technologies would be to replicate this physical contact, the emotions, simply that you really have the feeling that you're sitting in front of someone, that you're speaking with someone. And unfortunately, exactly for this point, we are still a couple of years away. I see a couple of things on the horizon that might come, but we are clearly for the moment not yet there. But even if we have now some video chat or so, it will not be the same as kind of physical contact where you can kind of feel the person, feel the emotion and see the emotions. A couple of those things that I see for the future are on one hand, but this is also limited to certain case of uses, is for example holographic images. This might work very well if you have somewhere on stage a person who should be on stage and who speak. In this case, you can already today, you can have very stunning results by having this person physically present while being still only in hologram. But it will not work for the broad public, simply where you have 20, 30 people simply just connecting in a networking room. That will not work. Then I see on the horizon another technology, which is augmented reality. I mean, a lot of people speaking that Apple might introduce, for example, the Apple glasses with augmented reality. Microsoft has with a HoloLens, for example, a product which is ready. And I see quite a lot of potential here, so that you simply put on a glass and you are sitting in front of a camera, which might simply film you in 3D, which might be also able just to provide a different image of what you are. And then you're seeing the person that you are speaking with actually standing just in front or sitting in front of you in the room, which will make a huge difference, because you will have more the feeling than that this is kind of a real chat actually. Then on the other hand, I would also say it's maybe also a generational question. So I'm 44 years old and I see a lot of people around myself. A good friend of mine, for example, he's a business developer in a big Luxembourgish company. And for him, same age as me, for him, this whole virtual thing is suspect. So he doesn't like it. Actually, he says, I cannot wait actually till I get back on the place to speak normally with people. Then on the other hand, look at people today who are 20, 21, the typical millennials or the Y generation. They are much more open-minded to adopting new technologies and accepting that virtual is kind of the new real also. So when I see in my family a relative of my wife, for example, she's 22 years old, and when she speaks about friends she has all over the world, then these friends, she has never seen them in person, but they are quite close to her. And that's kind of a mindset which is very different. And I predict also that this will also be a question where people who are maybe younger, actually, that they will struggle less with adopting these new technologies, while those people who are maybe above 40, just as me, they might have more hard times to accept that this is virtual and that it also works. But still, a lot of technology in the pipeline, and I'm pretty sure that there are interesting technologies which will surface also over the next years. But still, I don't think that we'll have a nice replacement for networking and for physical contact before, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years.
You mentioned the generational problems that occur. Do we think, as a panel, do we think companies are now using their training to retrain people in the soft skills that are required for these virtual meetings and presentations so that people can come across better?
Well, it's true that being in front of the camera and speaking with the camera and seeing the people virtually requires other soft skills rather than being kind of in networking. So being in a networking also is something that has to be learned. Speaking in front of people at a conference also has to be learned. It doesn't fall from the sky. So you have to acquire these skills. And I see a big necessity indeed for trainings that companies are training their people. First of all, it's taking away the scarcity. I mean, people are scared simply being in front of the camera sometimes, and it's not necessarily in the benefit of those people who are already shy, because even those people who are shy, they will maybe even be more shy when they have to speak up in front of the camera. Then on the other hand, it's also a question simply, how do you present yourself in front of the camera? How do you speak in front of the camera? That's something which feels weird. It is awkward at the beginning, and at the same time also having also the surroundings. You need to have kind of a room which is maybe a little bit more presentable. You might need to have a little bit of light which is installed so that you're looking not so bad on the camera. Audio equipment, I mean, for sure, I'm in the preferred situation, or in the situation that I have a video production company, so I have a nice microphone, I have a light installed here, I have a very good camera in front of me. But all these things shall also develop over the next years so that the people become more aware of this and know how to use these new technologies. And this said, actually proposing, especially in the bigger companies, but also in the smaller ones, trainings for people, how to use that and how to adequately present themselves in front of the webcam is absolutely something which is mandatory for me.
Thank you, Peter. Serge, if we can turn to you, seeing as we're talking about technology, you've been working on this digital identity and biometrics and working with border management together with international organizations such as World Travel and Tourism Council and the International Air Transport Association. Can you tell us a bit more about this, and how close are we to what we might call seamless travel, if that's a word?
Thank you, Duncan, for the question. Well, we touched base on a few things here. Well, and we explored the solution we have on virtual meetings and how these meetings could be even closer to what could be a physical meeting. If we look a little bit back on what is the situation and why we are in such a complex situation right now with countries closing borders from time to time, regions sometimes in countries, in European countries, having different requirements for travelers, So for operators, all across the value chain of the travel is extremely complex. So one of the things we learn, I think, from this crisis is the lack of, if we look at Europe in particular, the lack of harmonization in terms of rules, in terms of, well, decisions also, and that makes also for travelers, but also operators, a very complex environment that is changing on a daily basis sometimes. And that's something Europe is working on it. We will see, and that will be the link I will make with the travel and how to facilitate that travel. Working on having a central system that can operate travelers, so that this system will provide a better safety and security features to the whole chain, I would say. So that's in process. There's still a long way to go to have one border management system in Europe that will bring the trust that will not stop a traveler in France and allow it in Belgium, for instance. So I think that's really a weak point in Europe right now, is this disharmonization of the travel and the lack of usage also of technology, and that makes the link with the future. And you talked about seamless travel. One of the pillars of the World Travel and Tourism Council objectives to really go back to travel is to bring this seamless travel to life across the value chain, across different actors. And so the objective there is to digitalize the steps of the traveler, to bring, we talk about health and safety need from the travelers, that the reassurance that they can have. Now you need to stop many times to prove your identity, give your border pass, etc., etc. It's with this crisis has been emphasizing that travelers want to change that, and they want to have a seamless travel, don't want to be stopped, and have the assurance also that you can be checked on the health aspect as well. So both combined, these solutions are there, they are available on the market. Now it's a question to have the funding also to bring that to life, federate also the different actors, bring the same information together also on borders and passenger facilitation together. I think that's the objective. So you have the biometrics to really enable this identification of the person very easily, with all the privacy by design aspects and principle that needs to come with them. And then you have also the health checks that do exist and being combined sometimes with new technologies that could also bring this on an automated basis, this certainty about traveling. And once I think this will be live, this will be certainly a key enabler to guarantee that you have a safe travel, and that all across the different points from home to home, you have a really a certainty about that these processes have been very clear and automated and safe.
So how close are we to such a solution being implemented?
It depends on the geography again. I think you can see that well, in US, in Asia, it's a bit forward. In Europe, there has been some projects and some pilots, and I think one of them will be in Munich Airport in the future, where you have this traveler experience that will be bring to life. We can see that during the crisis, even for with these difficult times, the project didn't stop. So it's really a priority for the airlines and the other operators like the airports to bring that to life. How close we are, I think there's still a bit of time to see that, because you have the difficulty that you have connections between different operators, and you need these operators well, to agree on connecting the information. And sometimes this is really the blocking factor. And you have in the middle of the traveler journey, you have a border control, where you ask also about the same information, but from, of course, the government perspective. So once this whole circle will be connected, I think that will be a future way to travel, and completely different that we know today. How far are we? That will depend on the on also the financing that will be put in it. But technology is there. Now it's a question to put that together.
I mean, you've mentioned financing. Do you think this will make travel more expensive or in the long run cheaper?
It's a difficult business case, I would say, for this, because right now you see that also the technology is quite expensive for the moment. I expect that there will be a drop in that quite radically once also the market will open for those solutions. Today it's very small scale across the globe, piloting new projects or live connection with passenger facilitation. I think the market will be growing, so price will be dropping. And there is another one on the EU level side, on the border management side also, that brings opportunity for the solution provider, because the border will, if we take Europe, for instance, in the future, in 2-3 years, all borders, so sea, air, and land borders, will be connected with one system, taking biometrics of all travelers, third country national coming in and out of the Schengen area. So this is a new market for the solution provider. So there will be investment, there will be a lot of R&D also on that. So I expect the price going down and this solution being commodities in the near future.
Great, thank you for that input, Serge. Going back to the Chamber survey, it indicates that most people think the cost of business travel will increase when it returns to some sort of normality, if we can call it that. Mario, in your experience, is that a correct assessment? That the cost of business travel will increase after this pandemic is over, if it's ever over?
It's, to be honest, that's a very complex question, because there are so many factors which may influence the right price to be paid. So simply imagine that all the aircrafts have been grounded during lots of weeks and months. There was no demand on fuel. So that could be already one of the factors for the future. So is the fuel going to be, the price of the fuel going to raise? So that's already the first question, considering that the consumption of fuel is one of the highest cost factor for an airline. Other factors, if you were taking 10 minutes time to prepare a trip nowadays, so in the future you might need to plan half an hour to give all the right information to our clients. So starting from giving information about restrictions concerning immigrations, safety and health, the entire risk management, collecting the right data and to be transmitted, or simply to feed our systems so that the corporations can track their travelers at every moment. And then also maybe the travel policy will be adapted within the different corporations. So as long as the airlines cannot guarantee that in economy class, the seat behind you can be blocked, what is quite normal. So because one flight is not the same to the other, the load factor from one flight may be at a certain level that the airline cannot afford and block your neighbor's seat. So maybe some corporations will think about giving authorization to a certain community to move from economy to premium class or even to business class for the future. So directly or indirectly, this may influence the price to be paid for the future, sure. But at what extent, I cannot be more clear about that for a moment.
Okay, thank you. I mean, we've talked a lot about the challenges that this pandemic has caused and that the business travel industry faces. But what do we think, as one last question to you all before we move on to questions from the audience, what do we think are the opportunities that could arise for the business travel industry from this pandemic? Robert, maybe we could start with you.
To come back just quickly to Mario's point and to add something on it, I think that the way we travel might be impacted for the next couple of months until we get used to a new way of looking at things. I think that the booking of a ticket that we used to do on our smartphones via an app within minutes, that is probably at the moment not anymore the right way to do it. And I think the opportunity that comes with it is that we need to go back to what we had in the past. So we need to work with travel agents. We need to work with people who can give us and deliver the answer what is possible. So if I want now to buy a ticket from A to B, I can buy it, but who guarantees me, who tells me, okay, what can I find when I arrive there? What happens at my departure airport, or on go to Paris, I want to take the train. What can I expect? And I think there is the opportunity to add on some services to it, where we can have then the possibility to educate ourselves, but also educate then our fellow travelers, where we say, okay, when you go now to take now the TGV to Paris, then you can expect in Paris somebody will be measuring your temperature. I'm just but I think that the opportunity that we're gonna have there is the information to the people. But that information needs to be adapted and constantly revised. And that is what makes our operation at the moment so difficult, is that we have to revise that information constantly. Now, if I go back to what Serge said, during pandemic, and let's do not forget that the first thing that that went out of the window was Schengen. So suddenly borders closed within Europe. So, and if we do not have that information at the right moment, well, we run into trouble right away. So I think that the opportunities that are there is to have an in between the traveler and its journey that will bring some information to the traveler and educate it. I think that's one of the items that will come in.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Peter, do you have something to add?
Well, I could, of course, now say the opportunity now in general of this whole crisis would be that more virtual technology will be used. Of course, me with my company would kind of also take advantage of, but I would like maybe to paint a little bit a broader picture, because I see one of the opportunities which is coming, or one of the benefits maybe even of this crisis, is that we're going to readjust kind of a little bit the business travel, and that we're going to abolish maybe a lot of those unnecessary business travel which became simply a habit. I'm not going to start speaking now about Friday for Future, which has been a little bit forgotten over the last months, but still all these things were already developing. People were criticizing millennials were traveling maybe less because they became more aware of their carbon footprint. And when I just simply categorize business travels in 3 different categories, and I see on one hand the necessary business travels. I remember myself, I had a meeting with one of the was the head of sponsorship of America, was one of the biggest banks in New York, and he wanted to meet me in person. So this is kind of the travel that you cannot abolish. You have to sit on the plane, you have to fly over there. Then you have these nice to have travels. I remember we had been asked by a client to film one single interview in Athens because they wanted us to film it actually. So my colleague, he was flying over to Athens. He was spending one night there. He had to pack in all the material, etc. It was an interview of 1 hour actually, and the local production company could have also also perfectly filmed it. So it was understandable that they wanted us to film it to have the same quality as always. But these are kind of the travels where I say, okay, it's nice to have, and you should really consider, is it really necessary, or can you substitute by something else? And then on the other hand, we have the totally unnecessary travels. I mean, here in Luxembourg, for example, if a company is incorporated here in Luxembourg, but the people, the staff are sitting, for example, in London once a year, the people have to fly over because they have to sign the documents, accounts, etc. And this has to be done on Luxembourgish ground. So the situation happens actually that these people are flying with a plane over to Luxembourg. They get out of the plane, they go to a meeting room at the airport, they sign the documents there, they climb back to the same plane, and they fly back to London. And these are the kind of travels where I would say, is it really necessary? And shouldn't we just readjust kind of, and use the occasion to readjust such travels? And I know I'm not necessarily making myself now friends with Mario or with Robert, for example, but I think it's an occasion also to review these things and to maybe develop a more kind of sustainable business travel for the future, which probably will also be, again, a little bit more expensive as it has been in the past.
Thank you, Peter. Serge, maybe you could round off, and then I will hand back to Colin, who will moderate the questions from the audience.
Well, yeah, so the opportunities is very difficult to assess right now. What we can think about is also that well, there will be many changes in the operators themselves. Low costs, high costs, moderate costs, how we call them, high-end services, type of services that will be needed, type of travel that will be prioritized. So you see a lot of different new parameters will come into the play to operators to adapt also their offers, their services. So that's an opportunity for some players. That will be a very big threat for others, depending on their positioning. Yeah, and then new ways of the experience that the travelers will look at. Sorry. So that is an opportunity for some players that have the capacity to invest also in that, because this is a bit the tricky part of it. This crisis brings new need, and you need funding to do that. But the whole industry is about to collapse with this if the crisis is going to last too long. So really need this funding mechanism to put in place as well to back that up. And so opportunities for other means of physical meetings, yes, that's for sure. We see that with the value of the Zoom application that we use right now. So big transformation there as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution. I'm going to hand back to Colin, who is going to ask some questions that have been posed via the Q&A.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Duncan, very much. So we've received some fantastic questions from the audience during the event. So I'm just going to briefly pose some of those questions to the panelists. Philip Taylor observed, could business travelers consider other forms of transport? Our discussion this morning has centered and looked substantially at the aviation industry, but of course there are other alternatives, road and rail. What are the panel's views on this? Do we have any takers or anybody that would like to comment?
Let me try to answer this question to Phil. So yes, it's also the moment for many corporates for a total consideration of, about environmental impacts, and they are doing it. But of course, also now for the resume to travel for the next future, European travel will start first, simply because there are direct flights, and to avoid other risk transiting airports. But we have also from experience, we know from experience that the rail does not substitute completely long flights. So it was many years ago a good product to Paris, and now extending also to other French cities and even to other European countries. But the comfort that business travel is used to, and if possible, fly in and fly out the same day, cannot be totally replaced for the moment by rail without other health and safety considerations, because then you would have to be also in mass train stations, meeting other people, and also spend your nights in an hotel, because obviously you cannot come back the same day. And also the environmental aspect is key for some corporates. Yes, but not immediately.
Thank you, Mario. A question from John Johnson, specifically on the aviation industry. So commercial airlines are changing their business models. Old aircraft are being retired, jumbo aircraft grounded and unlikely to fly again, specifically 747s and A380s. The charging fees for tickets are being dropped. And the question to the panel is, what other changes do the panel see to the airline's proposition to travelers post-COVID?
If I may start maybe with the answer, and I'm sure that that some of my colleagues will complete it. If we go now back to the Airbus 380 and 747, I think the first time you see one, you are amazed by how big those things are. But that means also that they are able to carry 400, 500, 600 people. So to be able to have a maximum occupancy on their flights, you need to fly them through hubs. So be it Frankfurt, be it Heathrow, and Paris, and the other, or Amsterdam, those are the major ones in Europe. So you have to have smaller airplanes who fly you first to the hub before that you enter into a 747 or Airbus 380. Now, I think that has now changed. The demand is not anymore there to fill those airplanes. What the evolution may be is also what you have as newer models. I think the Airbus 350 or the 787 are becoming now household names. They are light. I was reading yesterday between open competition between Paris and La Réunion. Air France with their 777s, which is a very modern airplane, and their competitors who were using the Airbus 350, the difference in fuel usage was 25%. So this, in a moment where the demand is not there, is very, very important. Now, the evolution of it, what could it be? The evolution, I think, is going to be more the point-to-point travel. If we look at the new airliners who are being built and people want to go point-to-point. If you can avoid to transfer via a hub, you will do it. So for us now, driving to Brussels takes exactly the same time as if you would now go through a hub. But you may have a point-to-point and fly with a smaller aircraft, means less people at the border control, means quicker times. And if it's point-to-point, there's even a chance that they will not lose your baggage for those who are still using baggage to put baggage in a hold. So I think that the evolution will be just a practicality. I think that we will see certainly also in the René Steinhauser development of Luxembourg Airport with intercontinental travel. There is the need for it, and I can very well imagine that that Luxair, our home carrier, will open again a transcontinental line. I mean, some of us have used the Dubai connection. Well, it was Ras Al Khaimah, but I mean, within 1 hour you're at Dubai, and I can imagine that they will probably go westbound when the borders are opening and we finally have the masks who are coming off. I think then we can see smaller airports who certainly are going to show some spectrum destinations. People won't have point-to-point. The transfer via hub, I think that is losing momentum at the moment. I don't know if Mario, my other colleagues are agreeing on this.
Yes, Robert, if I may jump in. Indeed, I fully agree with you. The demand is coming, first of all, for European markets, point to point, but if possible, a day return. And that was also one of the main objectives when we launched this survey together with Luxair. After knowing what is the intention for travel, the next future, there were also some last questions about what do you expect from us as an airline to start again traveling, respectively, to gain confidence again. And of course, one of the biggest advantage that we have in such a small country is that Luxair will try to listen to these opportunities. So where possible, they will, and if the fleet allows, they will try and put a daily return instead of flying every day to a certain destination, but not necessarily a day return. They will try and adapt and do day return the same day. Where possible, of course, I'm not talking on behalf of them, but the main intention of the survey was also that, adapt to the client needs, and in terms of health and security, that's what they expect from the airlines today.
Thank you all very much. We did have some other questions, but unfortunately, as we're almost out of time, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you. So this, from my perspective, this is certainly an incredibly interesting subject, and I will certainly watch with great interest to see how events unfold over the coming months. Before we close, I would just like to say a huge thank you to Duncan for moderating our webinar this morning, and also to all of our panelists. I would also like to thank once again Post Luxembourg for sponsoring our webinar. Thank you very much once again to you all.